Hey there guys, we're taking a look at Deep Rock Galactic running on the AMD Ryzen 5 5500U. Now the game is currently running with the lowest in-game graphics settings, except there were some adjustments made to the preset because what it does is it adjusts the target render resolution, and at the lowest preset it pretty much goes to about 25% resolution, which is dramatically low. So I currently have it set to 100% resolution, but of course everything else was left to the lowest graphics setting, except for textures, which were also set to medium. Oh, except I forgot to bring up the fact that it's using FSR. Yeah, so the game actually supports FSR, and it's currently set to its performance preset, which means that it is running at pretty much half of 1080p. So it's actually not running at 100% resolution. It is 1080p with FSR set to performance. And it was a pretty welcome addition here because overall the performance that we were going to be getting was a lot better than if we were just running at the native resolution, and it looked significantly better than if we were just using the lower render resolution that the game would normally go with if you just went with the default presets and didn't enable FSR. Because the image that we're getting even at the performance preset is pretty decent, and I think it's just the fact that the art style of this game really lends itself to working with FSR, since in general everything doesn't have too much detail. A lot of the rougher aspects of FSR at the lower settings get kind of hidden, so usually what it does to textures and stuff like that is just a lot less noticeable here, and overall it gives you just a much better experience. Though the 15-watt TDP just in general has issues with 1% lows. It seems to be the most consistent thing that we see throughout a lot of games, that the 15-watt TDP, what you're really seeing the most issues with usually is just the 1% lows. Its averages usually aren't that far away from the 25-watt TDP. It's mostly just those 1% lows end up being pretty drastically different. You can see that currently, while we're getting some very solid averages, our 1% lows are pretty abysmal right now, and it mostly just has to do with the fact that as things are loaded in, there will be stuttering that occurs. So when you are going into new areas, there might be slowdown, but things will level off as you're actually playing through. As you can see by the frame times, everything remains really consistent even if those 1% lows are showing to be pretty low. It really just depends on when things decide to actually load in. So overall, it is at least playable at these settings, though in the moments of intense action when there's a lot of enemies running around, things can start to slow down, but the 1% lows really are only brought down here mostly by the fact that as things load in, there will just be those moments of stutter that happen here and there. It's not really enough to ruin the overall experience. The game itself actually just runs really well even at the 15-watt TDP, which I was actually really impressed with. But in general, you'll see in moments where things are starting to load in, you'll see those frame times will just kind of go crazy, and then things will level off again. They'll go crazy again. It really all just depends. It's not going to be the greatest experience ever, but it is at least doable. And the moments where things are stuttering are moments where you can at least understand why it's happening. It's as things are being loaded in. It's less to do when you're in a high action situation, though in those moments the frame rate in general will just drop down in terms of what is the average that you're getting. And as you can see here, while I'm actually being attacked by this drone here, you'll see that my overall experience does become pretty rough. With that said, we can try to improve the performance here. What we can of course do is maybe try to lower the resolution, or we can try to raise the TDP. So we're going to go with raising the TDP. So if we raise the target TDP all the way up to 25 watts with the balance preset in the AMD APU tuning utility, you'll be able to see what kind of performance we get right here. And as you could see, we do see a noticeable improvement in the 1% lows, though it isn't anything too dramatic. It overall does make the experience just better. There will still be those moments where the frame times will be kind of all over the place, and it's not going to be the most consistent or smooth experience, but considering the kind of game that we're getting here and how we're able to run it on the system, I'm actually very impressed, because this was a very playable experience. I was actually playing it with a friend and we were having a very good time playing it. In general, I didn't feel like it was too much of a detriment to play overall, but I was playing with a controller here since I was just, relaxing recording this. In general, I feel like most people would be more than fine with playing the game like this, and you really won't notice too many issues whatsoever. It's not exactly going to be the greatest experience, but again, I think if you don't have an FPS counter and you're just playing the game, you're going to be more than fine, especially if you're playing with friends and you're just getting, distracted by the fact that you're just hanging out. It's one of those things where it was a very casual gaming experience, and honestly, it was very pleasant and enjoyable. Now, I can understand if you're one of those people that gets really invested in this kind of stuff, that maybe it's not going to be, your cup of tea in terms of the performance. Maybe those 1% lows are just going to be too too distracting for you, or those frame times you're really gonna feel them. But at least for me, it was not a problem whatsoever. I had a more than decent enough time playing like this, and I would more than happily continue to play like this. Of course, we can try to improve this even more by raising the TDP all the way up to 30 watts and see if that does anything for our performance. You'll see here that overall what it really just ends up doing is it makes our 1% lows stay around 30 FPS for the most part. It will dip down in certain moments, but in general this is about as smooth as it's going to get at 1080p, though the temperatures that we were getting here were getting into some pretty hot numbers. I had my AC at full blast today, so I was actually able to play it pretty decently in the low 80s, but it's still way too hot a temperature for me to comfortably play. I really would just not recommend playing at these temperatures if that's what you're getting on your system. If you're running at anything lower, like if you can be at 30 watts and get your temperatures in the 70s, then you are going to be able to get a actually very solid experience a lot of the time. But in general, I found the game to be pleasant really to play at all the TDP settings. So overall, I feel like if you want to go with like 900p, you can, but just know that at that point FSR is really working overtime here. But anyways, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.